Three, two, one, and welcome back. Now we've got something a little bit different for all of you. We're going to talk about something that is not a normal topic of ours because it's not something that we usually expose our podcast listeners to, because this is more of a high-level coaching conversation that we'll have on occasion with certain clients. And I'm going to tell you what spawned the idea of today's show. So I'm on a coaching call with a very high-profile, in case they're listening, I'm going to try to keep the details to myself, but I'm on a coaching call with a very high profile coaching client. And this is one of the most successful agents in the United States. And he's having a lot of issues in his business and his personal life that have to do with family and have to do with finances. And normally those things do go together. If you're having problems with finances, oddly enough, it has a tendency to sprinkle into or leak into all other aspects of your life. And so what we did on that coaching call, and what we're going to do with you guys today and tomorrow, is we're going to work through a plan, a survival plan, if you will, to help you regain control if you're feeling lack of control. So the topic of today's and tomorrow's show is how to break free from financial, spiritual, and business death spiral. Now, death spiral is probably too strong of a word.
Made you pay attention, though, didn't it?
It did indeed. But really the whole takeaway, the whole point and purpose of the show is so that you can build in a system so that you can, use our notes, and then you can basically have these notes at the ready so you can check yourself against a sort of, I think, downward spirals that you might be having in your business and your personal life. Because it's easy to have happen. And oftentimes what happens is if you don't stop yourself from, essentially getting worse, there's an old saying is whatever you fear the most is what you're most likely to manifest or create in your life. And so if you're manifesting, a lot of things that are bringing you really bad things in your life, you've got to be the one that's going to take responsibility for that and turn it around. So what this ultimately is going to act as is I think a check against yourself in the event that you do need occasional redirections if you're flying off course.
That's very well said. And ultimately, this will become your survival plan. So I don't think we mentioned how to get the notes, since it is a plan that they'll want to follow.
Yes, and there's a lot to this. Like I said, I spent a lot of time on this because this is a fair example of what happens if you're a high-level coaching client, frankly. There's no coasting on coaching calls. But in any event, so if you want the notes, you can go to harrisrealestatedaily.com. harrisrealestatedaily.com is our daily newsletter, which is going to include all the notes from that day's podcast, but in addition to that, the actual podcasts and a lot of very unique content we create just for our podcast listeners. And I do think this would be a good time to mention too, we, as a lot of our regular listeners know, that Julie and I are very excited about introducing to the marketplace our new designation called Ethical Real Estate Professional. We've really created something we're very proud of. We know you guys are going to benefit greatly from. So what we're going to do is we're going to combine that with Premier Coaching. And we're basically going to call it Premier Coaching 2.0. And so if you're in Premier Coaching, get ready for a massive upgrade. If you want to peek at what Ethical Real Estate Professional is all about, just go to the website, ethicalrealestateprofessional.com. Oh, I didn't tell you this, Julie.
What's that?
All right, so if you go to Google right now, and you could do it on your phone. Is your phone, are you online?
I can be in a
All
second.
right, go to Google, and I want you to put in, there you go. Go to Google. I have to sometimes tell Julie how to use Google. I'm kidding. And put in ethical real estate. Just put in ethical real estate. And look what comes up first.
All right, let's see. And there we are.
Yeah, so already
Nice.
That's number one.
That's great.
Yes. So the point of that is that Ethical Real Estate Professional is going to be a unique designation that we do believe is going to be the hallmark designation and a way of differentiating yourself in the marketplace. And obviously Google agrees with us. So we're going to allow a limited number, probably 2,500, 3,500, we haven't really decided yet, of agents. And we really frankly want our podcast listeners and our coaching clients to be the agents that take advantage of this, to become ethical real estate professionals. And this is going to be a designation that's backed with an enhanced version of Premier Coaching, which is going to include new presentations, new pre-listing packs, and everything else. And so we're going to be rolling out this program. Those of you who are regular listeners know we've been working on this now for about 4 months, but as you'll see, as you soon will discover, it's going to be something really, truly we think it's going to shift the real estate industry for those who participate to a higher level. So if you want to be considered to be part of this new program, we're going to be doing a launch event sometime next month, early next month, probably the second week. And so you have to text the word buyer, B-U-Y-E-R, to 47372. Then you're going to be on the list, and we'll text you an invite. So text the word buyer, B-U-Y-E-R, to 47372. We're really hoping to keep this just amongst our coaching clients, our podcast listeners, and obviously our EXP family. So do text the word buyer, B-U-Y-E-R, to 47372 and be part of what we know will be a revolution in real estate. So do that right away. All right, so Julie, let's get into our notes. We've done enough commercials, and let's roll right in and cover as much ground as we can today.
Yes, so again, our topic today and tomorrow is how to break free from the financial, spiritual, and business death spiral. Life and business often throw challenges our way that make us feel stuck, overwhelmed, or spiraling downward, as our title alludes to. If you're facing financial struggles, marital discord, or professional uncertainty, you're not alone. What's important is recognizing the spiral and then, of course, taking action. So we're going to be rolling out our plan. We're going to have some discussion, and then you know how to get the notes for your survival plan. It's a roadmap to regain control, refocus your energy, and rebuild your confidence.
Julie, let's give a little bit better of an analogy, because I realized having you read those notes, I probably could have done a better job, and I'll make it really short. So imagine you're living in a place where well, I'll give you guys an example. So when Julie and I moved, and our family moved to Puerto Rico, now 6 years ago, right when we landed, there were a lot of earthquakes. And by a lot of earthquakes, I mean like flipping earthquakes all the damn time.
Big ones, too.
Yeah, you thought you had vertigo. They were so frequent. You think I'm exaggerating, but I'm not.
No, we didn't know what we were thinking.
Right. And so we moved to Puerto Rico. We knew there were going to be some challenges. We heard about the power grid and, all these other hurricanes. Yeah, well, those types of things. No big deal, hurricanes. But, okay, well, we didn't know about the damn earthquakes. So we moved here, and like right when we landed and got, I think moved in, the electricity went off, the water went off, and the things were shaking all the time. And we did our homework on it. It turns out at the bottom of Puerto Rico, there's a fault line. Do you guys know Puerto Rico? It's down by Ponce in the ocean. That causes, guess what? A lot of damn earthquakes. And it's one of the most active earthquake zones in the world. Which, of course, your brilliant podcast host did not know about.
Didn't occur to us to look that up on Google before moving. No.
Well, so why did I tell you that? Because there are seismographs, and you guys know what those are, hopefully, that are little sensors that let everyone know if there's any kind of looming earthquake. And so what they are is they're little, technical machines, little devices, measuring devices that will look for tiny undulations and movement in the surface of the earth and down below in the surface of in the crust of the earth, I suppose. Well, not the crust, but you guys get the idea. If these machines start picking up little movements, and then they will judge their algorithms, I suppose, will then, based on the frequency and the intensity of these little movements, they'll be able to sort of, I would guess it would be able to guess and predict if there's going to be an earthquake, how big the earthquake's going to be, all those types of things, right? That's what a seismograph, I think that's what isn't that what it's called? Yeah, pretty sure that's what it's called. So in the event that you had one, what would be your little early warning signs that you maybe have some sort of big earthquake coming? That's what I want you guys to keep in mind as we're rolling into step one, and that's acknowledge your signs.
Very good analogy. And if you recall, before that first giant earthquake that kicked the whole thing off, I don't know if you remember this, but first we heard a big thunk, and then immediately after was an earthquake, and somebody told me that was the seismograph telling the grid to shut itself off, so that it doesn't get affected even more severely.
Well, you know what? Since you brought that up, we should tell people really so they're thoroughly convinced we're super dumb. All right. Okay. So this was back in 2000 and Laguna Beach.
Oh, okay.
So we lived in Laguna Beach for part-time for 7 years? Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're living out in Laguna Beach. This is another true story. This is before Zoe was born. So we leave Columbus, Ohio, New Albany, Ohio, and we fly out to LAX. We rent this big-ass van. We've got, how many dogs? 3, 2?
2 dogs.
2 dogs, and a bunch of junk. And we drive down to Laguna Beach for LAX. It's in the middle of the night. We finally find our rental. I'm telling you, it's dark as dark could be. We get into our rental. And, we're tired as, you guys can imagine. This is like a good thorough 24 hours worth of flying from Ohio with all the layovers. Moving travel, and with 2 crotchety old dogs, the whole thing.
All the 10 suitcases.
All the things. We're very adventurous, as you guys can tell. Yeah. So we're in the middle, we're in this little condo, and it's, we can't, supposedly it looks at the ocean, but we can't tell because it's the middle of the night and you can't see anything. And all of a sudden we hear what sounds like a truck like hitting the side of the building.
Yeah.
And do you remember that?
I do remember
and
that.
it was ridiculously loud, and then the building shook. And then we're like, what the hell? Welcome to California, bitches. Okay, so we woke up the next day, and we asked what the hell happened. We looked for the building to have a damage. Somebody, whatever.
It did feel like a truck had hit.
It did. And the neighbors goes, oh no, that's just an earthquake. And we're like, remember, we're flatlanders from Ohio.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tell me about tornadoes. I got it, but not earthquakes.
So we're not real good, at living what we preach, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, but that shows, your environment. My first thought, even after living there for years, my first thought was never, oh, that was an earthquake. Even because we experienced other ones. I remember I was typing something with my laptop on the couch, and the dog was at my ankles, and I remember a big shake, and my first thought was, did he just hit the couch? It wasn't like, because we have French Bulldog bowling ball dogs, right? It was not, oh, that was an earthquake. I trained myself to look at like the chandelier. If that's swinging, okay, that must have been something, because, So acknowledge the signs, as we maybe were not so good at in previous incarnations. Before you can fix any spiral or being stuck, you have to identify what the issue is. So ask yourself these questions. Are you feeling out of control in your business or personal life? Are you using alcohol, drugs, food, or other coping mechanisms to suppress that anxiety? Are you and your spouse disconnected, working towards different goals or ignoring financial realities?
That's the biggest one, in my opinion.
I agree. And that could be not having any goals. It could be having different goals. It could be lack of communication, probably all of the above.
Brandon Burchard asked me, and this was a long time ago, well, we were sitting on the beach here in Puerto Rico, and when he was our neighbor, and he asked me, him and his wife, Denise, were celebrating their anniversary. I forget what it was, 10 years or something. And he asked how long, Julie and I had been married, and I told him at the time it was like 30 years, and he was like jaw dropped, and he was, because we're just a little bit older than him. So he asked what the secret was, like, there's a secret, and the answer is, and it definitely is true, is you have to you obviously can have individual goals, but when you're married, or you have a partner, somebody you are making a lifelong commitment to, you have to have shared goals. And those shared goals have to be on all the usual, physical, family, spiritual, because if you don't, it's very easy for there to be fissures or early warning signs, little cracks that start to create, bigger cracks. And the next thing you know, there's a big earthquake, and it's hard to put things Humpty Dumpty back together again. So if there's one thing in particular, if some of you are looking for a little pearl to take away from today's show, I'll strongly encourage you just to lean into that one very basic point. Next point is, are you robbing Peter to pay Paul, dipping into savings or maxing out credit cards? And a lot of people do that. It is fascinating how much people rationalize essentially using debt to subsidize a failing business, and they'll do it from borrowing against life insurance, they'll do it against essentially borrowing using home equity, and all those types of things.
Things that are not actual income sources.
No, and there's so many examples, because Julie and I have done literally hundreds of thousands of coaching calls, where you see people, folks are really elegant about rationalizing robbing Peter to pay Paul.
That's right. You'll hear things like, well, you have to spend money to make money, or
Exactly.
It's the cost of doing business.
Right. Or they'll say, like, I'm reinvesting the money back in my business.
Yeah,
that's the one
common.
you hear a lot, especially in real estate. So so do you have any savings? No. Do you have, what's your situation as far as like you having any kind of war chest or anything that's going to give you any sense of financial security? Oh, I don't have any. I'm reinvesting all my money back in my business. No, what you're doing is you're spending a lot of money on things that aren't getting you a return on investment. Otherwise, you'd have profit to stick into things that are going to actually build long-term financial stability for you. So stop lying to yourself and saying you're investing money back in your business, because the reality of it is you should have enough profit to do both.
That's right. What you're doing is you're subsidizing your lack of income. And the problem is that is unsustainable.
It's subsidizing lack of income, Julie, but it's also subsidizing ego.
Sure.
It's subsidizing lack of skill. Mm-hmm. It's subsidizing deficiencies in the business model. For example, you're delegating something really critical like pre-qualifying leads to a subordinate that's frankly not that good at it.
Yep.
All kinds of different things. So if you don't have any profit from your business, it goes back to what Julie and I always say, the product of your business is profit. So if you don't have ample amounts of profit in your business, you really need to take some personal responsibility for that, because that just compounds over time, especially as you get older, frankly.
That's very true. It doesn't get better.
Nope.
Another question is, do you feel alone, like nobody understands your challenges? Again, a lot of this comes to coaching eventually. These are things that come out in the treasure map. We were talking about goal setting before, having the same financial goals, stuff like that. So here's the thing. If you answered yes to any of these, you should know this. You are not alone. Recognizing these signs is the first step towards change. You're already ahead of the curve because you're willing to face reality and do the work. Tim, to your point, stop lying to yourself. The first step, which we've been discussing for all these bullet points and questions, acknowledge the signs. realize that something has gone awry. And maybe you don't have all of these issues, maybe you just have one or two, but they're all related to identifying what's wrong.
Well, and the bitter pill to swallow, but this is honestly the best way to essentially break through your own bullshit with regards to what's essentially pulling you down the death spiral, to stick with that, I think, apt way of describing it, is if you're not willing to take responsibility. So going back to Julie's list, are you feeling out of control in your business and personal life? You need to take responsibility for that. You can't be looking for external reasons why, oh, it's my husband, it's my wife. It's the crazy market, it's interest rates. Nope, it's your responsibility. Remember the second question, early warning signs, right guys? Are you using alcohol, food, or other coping mechanisms to suppress anxiety? That's your fault if you're doing those things. Look, whether you believe alcoholism, for example, is a disease or not, it's your decision to put the alcohol in your body. You're making that decision. Now, granted, there probably is a genetic component to essentially what happens to the alcohol once it goes in your body, and the effect that it has on your brain that might lead to you, essentially becoming an alcoholic. But the reality of it is you're ultimately the one that's putting the food, the drug, or the whatever in your body. Are you and your spouse disconnected? Do not blame your spouse. It's your damn fault. You made that decision. You made the decision to allow a fissure to form between you and your spouse, or you and your children, or you and your partner, or you and your whomever. Are you robbing Peter to pay Paul, dipping into savings and maxing out credit cards? Again, don't blame your spouse. Even if it's your spouse that's doing it, you know about it, so you're party to it. I think it's, you're definitely not necessarily the one that's taking the money out of one account to subsidize the other, but you're party to it because you know about it. So don't say it's not your fault. And do you feel alone, like no one understands your challenges? That too is your fault, because you're surrounded by people that do understand your challenges, that are there to help, and that's possibly why you're listening to this podcast. So the real way you cut through your own BS is you always start with accepting full responsibility for whatever your plight is, or whatever your emotional, physical, financial, spiritual challenge is. It's my fault. Or as Mrs. Harris here is famous of saying, if it's meant to be, it's up to me. Own that shit.
Good, bad, or otherwise, if it's meant to be, it's up to me. So I think our step number one is not just to acknowledge it, it's to own it, right? It's beyond just saying it exists. It's saying it's because of me. So step number two is understand the reality of change. There's a quote by Heraclitus. He said, change is the only constant in life. If you're not failing, you're adapting to a new reality. The decisions that served you during the boom years, especially of 2020 to 2022, may no longer work. Scaling down, right-sizing, or pivoting is not failure, it's survival.
Now, let me. So when I wrote that point, I had to really hone it in. Frankly, I used ChatGPT to help me really focus that in, because it's very difficult for people to accept the fact that what worked in the past will work in the future, because it just doesn't.
Right.
I mean, you can see, remove yourself from it. Think in terms of like healthcare. Think in terms of all the other things that everyone was doing a few years ago. Now they're realizing it's a really bad idea. Hey, I got one. How about the COVID vaccination? I mean, you can go for all different kinds of examples of things that people were willing to die in the vine for, because they thought that's the way it was supposed to be. Remember when eggs were supposedly bad? Remember when red meat was supposedly bad? Remember when salt was supposedly bad? And now what happens, right? So you got to accept the fact that at the time, people were hopefully trying to give you advice that was the best advice for you. And at the time, when you were doing something, generally speaking, it's lead generation things, that were working a few years ago, maybe it worked a few years ago, and a few years ago that was a great decision, but now it's not, so you need to adapt. Same thing goes with business structure. Same thing goes with mindset. Same thing goes with financial planning, all the types of things. And now more than ever, and everyone always has said that, but there's never been this big wild thing called AI. Now more than ever, certainly in our lifetimes, change is going to come faster and I think more beneficial, honestly, than we've ever experienced before. And that beneficial for those who are willing to embrace it and not just saying, I'm going to make, if it's meant to be, or what's the old saying? When the going gets tough, the tough get going. All right, that sounds very noble, but what if what you're trying to get doing doesn't work anymore? So there's a version of that, which if you Google this, you'll realize Julie and I came up with this a few years ago. If the going gets tough, the smart leave. If the going gets tough, the smart leave. And yes, physically leave. If you're in a town that's failing and you don't want to fail along with the town, you might want to leave. Okay, if you're in a situation where you have a business model that's worked before but not working now, you might want to change it. And here's the hard part. It is a hell of a lot more easy and fun to scale up a business than it is to scale down a business. Look what's happening with the federal government right now, right? Look what's happening with Doge. Look what's happening with all these conversations about getting rid of all these departments. Those conversations are going to be a hell of a lot harder to have than say, hey, let's form a new department called whatever, 4-letter acronym or 3-letter acronym for whatever it's going to be, and hire a bunch of people.
Spin it up, right?
Exactly. So that's what the world is going through, certainly our country, and probably you should be considering going through a bit of a right sizing and at least your mindset.
Well, so let's take this out of real estate for a second, because a lot of what we're talking about is pretty intense today. It might be hitting them a little bit personally. And note to self, when you're presenting, guys, a lot of our coaching clients know this, tell a story about the topic, but not about the person, because that removes the ego and allows you to digest it, and it also releases some pressure. So to make this point about understanding the reality of change, there's a quick story about the saddle maker. Imagine you're a world-class saddle maker, as in like horse saddles, right? At the dawn of the automotive era.
You can sure tell that I wrote this, can't you?
Of course, it has to do with cars. Let's say that you're a saddle maker, but you decide to ignore cars, convinced that they're a fad, and you double down on making saddles. That's what you've done forever. That's what you're going to do. But as cars take over, it becomes clear. It's not about the quality of your saddles. It's about the fact that nobody's buying them anymore. The saddle makers who pivoted became pioneers in the automotive industry. What's the lesson? Embrace change and evolve with the market. Scaling down or adapting isn't failure. It's just the first step towards your next chapter.
You could, I mean, really, it wasn't saddle makers, it was carriage makers. But if you look at saddle makers, some of the, Hermes and, Louis Vuitton.
Well, they adapted, right?
They adapted. So all of us have got to adapt. That's just really the moral of the story.
Well, the first Hermes bag was to hold a saddle.
Oh, I know. Yeah. I do know that. And basically, as people stopped using saddles because they started driving cars and not riding horses, horses became a bit of a luxury. Then Hermes said, well, what the hell are we going to do? So then they started basically pivoting and making ladies' bags. And the ladies' bags were just scaled down versions of the bags that people were using to carry the saddles.
Exactly. They adapted is the point.
Yeah, and so we all have to adapt, guys. And again, AI is going to make it a hell of a lot more profitable. We're going to be able to replace things faster in terms of, I think, inefficiencies in our business that oftentimes have to do with marketing, advertising, a lot of staff with AI. And it's all going to be happening this year. There's no doubt about it.
Exactly. So that leads us to step 3, our final point for today. But things that you guys want to work on, you've got the notes, so make sure that you answer these questions we're going to do. First, a quote from you. If you don't know where you are now, it's hard to get where you want to go. Step number 3 is to get clear on your present situation. And by the way, the treasure map does a really good job asking that question and having them worksheet that out. So if you don't know where you are, it's hard to know where you want to go.
You realize you just said something I don't know how you're talking about?
The real estate treasure map?
Yeah, you do that.
I'm so used to talking about it.
I know.
Everybody
I know.
knows, so
Exactly. We're so
you
used.
can tell them how to get it.
We're always assuming we're preaching to our own choir, but the reality of it is a lot of you guys are listening for the first time. So real estate treasure map is our fill-in-the-blank business and personal plan, our life plan basically, and you get that for free when you join Premier Coaching, and it's in the first level of Premier Coaching along with a daily semi-private coaching call during every workday. And you can join Premier Coaching right now for free. So just go to premiercoaching.com. And first thing you need to do is download the Real Estate Treasure Map, because it is a very elaborate and frankly, by design, all-consuming fill-in-the-blank business plan that's going to force you to have all the conversations about all the 5 areas of life where you need to be focusing: physical, financial, spiritual, educational, familial, all the things, right? And so that's what the whole point of the treasure map is. So go to premiercoaching.com, or you can text the word Premier to 47372 and join Premier Coaching. It takes about 30 seconds.
That's right. So step number 3, get clear on the present. And part of the treasure map is called My Financial Situation, which honors that piece of the, the 5 goals in 5 areas, the financial one, and does a really good drill down on what is your present situation. So take an honest look at your current situation by asking these 3 clarifying questions. Number 1, if you knew 12 months ago what today's market would look like, fewer sales, higher interest rates, new buy-side commission agreements, what would you have done differently? That might lead you to what you need to be doing immediately. Number 2, are you spending money on things that are not giving you a clear return?
You want to hover there?
I do, because a lot of times agents will say, well, it paid for itself or something like that.
Well, they don't know how to track it.
They don't know how to track it, how to identify it. How do you even look at something? Am I spending money on things that are not giving a clear return? So define what a clear return actually means.
Well, you guys should have a very clear definition of what your definition of a clear return is, but I'll give you ours. And Al can tell you for sure when we've deviated from this, we've always regretted it. But it's like, if you're spending $1, you need to be determining what your return on that investment should be. So in my opinion, in real estate, with frankly how easy it is to generate proactive leads, if you're considering buying a lead, you should have a 10-to-1 return on that dollar. So if you're spending $1, you need to be making $10 back. Why? Because that passive lead generation, that paid lead generation that you're considering doing, marketing, branding, advertising, buying leads, anytime you're giving somebody a credit card number in exchange for a lead, even if it's in hopes of getting a lead, that's called buying leads. Advertising and marketing, because you're waiting to build your brand, is basically buying leads. Just be clear about that. And the reason I'm trying to make it simple is so that you can understand and be honest with yourself about what you're trying to do. By buying leads, what you're really trying to do is not have to do the proactive lead generation. But here's the beauty of the proactive lead generation. Your return on investment is off the charts insane. We told you guys this story last week, but Julie's got a new coaching client. And this new coaching client prospected, I think it was 1 or 2 days. He used RedX to basically hunt down all the new expireds in his marketplace. The RedX made 600 dials for him, not contacts. He made, I don't remember the numbers, but the gist of it is he generated 30 leads. And from those 30 leads, that's 30 conversations where he's going to be following up and he's going to be, pre-qualifying them. And this was a guy, I'm not going to say he was skillless, but he was basically skillless. No pre-qualification script, no pre-listing pack, no presentation.
Relatively new agent.
Relatively new agent, no scripts, nothing. Okay, so what did he do though? From that, but he's got great energy and enthusiasm. And frankly, the second I talked to him, I knew he was going to be wildly successful, okay? Because he had great energy and enthusiasm, because he was willing to admit what he didn't know. In other words, he wants to learn. So he set 11 listing appointments from that. 11! Now,
That's right.
From the 30 leads, he set 11 listing appointments. Now, how many of those 11 listing appointments? So he set these 11 listing appointments, and then he realizes he needs some help because he knows what the hell he's supposed to do.
I know.
Right? Then he calls us.
That's why we have coaching.
Exactly. Yeah. But here's an idea. Get the coaching prior to making the calls, and then you will have at least not necessarily, those 30 leads, you'll have done a better job pre-qualifying them and putting them in a better position. But what did it take him? Probably so far a total of maybe 10 hours to generate in his marketplace, which will be hundreds of thousands of dollars. Effort equals results. Return on investment. That's what we need to get you guys to understand. So if you're not seeing a 10-to-1 return on money you're spending buying leads, then you need to stop doing it and go back to learning what you should have learned in the first place and how to be a proactive lead generator. Make the calls, do the real work of real estate, and you're going to get more results than everyone else, especially in a market like this where there's a whole generation of agents that have spawned with their real estate licenses who have never heard our message, who have only been told to buy leads because the entire industry has been co-opted, and this is not a conspiracy theory, it is a fact, with our advertising and marketing companies that are paying brokers, paying speakers, paying gurus, paying people that are providing you guys with information to essentially support their lead buying businesses. So you go to Bob, the real estate expert, and it turns out Bob's a marketing and branding expert. And it turns out Bob is sponsored by XYZ Marketing and Branding Company. So Bob is basically a shill for the marketing companies. And most of our competitors, if not all of them, are shills for marketing and branding and advertising and lead selling companies. Julie and I are not. We do not do that. Obviously, we've been offered things like that over the last 20 years, and we've always said no.
That's because we believe keeping the money in your pockets. It's hard enough to earn it in the first place. You need to be keeping 80% of it. Okay, so that was all about point number 2, or question number 2. Are you spending money on things that are not giving you a clear return?
And remember, this was step 3, get clear on the present. Step 3, point 3, under step 3, is what are you doing right now that drains your time, energy, finances without producing results? I think we just covered that.
We did, but I want to add one little caveat because I've been going through this with some of my one-on-one coaching clients. What are you doing right now that drains time, energy, and finances without producing results? This can also mean team members who are riding and not rowing.
Oh boy.
Okay, so not that ever happens, but let's just say, it's always good. You should be doing this monthly or quarterly.
What does that mean, riding, not rowing?
Okay, so that would be a clear example would be a team buyer's agent who you are paying for leads for. You're giving them leads and they're not converting very well, or what they are converting, they're not closing, they're not using scripts, they're not presenting, they're not doing things the way that you expect. So you're spending money, but you're not getting results.
I would take it to another level.
Sure.
Okay, so riding, not rowing. Who in your business, in your team, in your brokerage produces income? Who actually creates revenue? Who's doing the selling? Who's getting the contract signed? Who's actually doing it on a consistent basis? Those are your rowers. Everyone else are riders.
That's right.
They could be riders just trying to act like they're rowers. Real supportive types, real nice types, processors, marketing and branding people, all these other types of people. So if you want to keep those rowers, if you want to keep those riders in your boat, here's your rule. They all have to be doing income generating, essentially efforts. And I'll give you the easy one. Every damn one of them should be doing BPOs.
That's
and
right.
we teach you guys how to do that in Premier Coaching. Everyone should be doing BPOs.
Exactly. So even a transaction coordinator can be a dollar productive assistant type, right?
Well, so if they have to earn $5,000 or $10,000 a month,
Yeah.
not only are they doing their TC work, but they're also making sure every transaction has a processing fee associated with
That's
it.
right.
They're also making sure that they're getting all the ancillary, maybe it's a home warranty, but they're also then responsible for doing a certain number of BPOs every month, and maybe they're responsible for selling a certain number of homes every month.
Well, that's right, or
That
at least
person,
referrals.
you need to zero cost the salary that you're paying them. They need to be generating enough revenue into your business to cover their expense, and I do not care what their job is.
Very well said. So we're going to leave you with that step 3, getting clear on the present. You have access to the notes, all of the questions that we've laid out for today. We're going to hover here and stay here and do part 2 tomorrow so that you can digest this and really come to terms with what we're talking about here. Maybe you're somebody that doesn't really feel super stuck right now, but when you get busy, you feel stuck, or certain times of year you feel stuck, or maybe you're looking at your next quarter saying, how am I going to produce that again? All of these questions of step 1, 2, and 3 apply to you in one way or another. So do the work before tomorrow's part 2.
All right, so I'm going to give you guys the bitterest of bitter pills to swallow. Oh yes, you're going to love this one. Julie, you can go. I know you have an appointment. Okay, sorry. So go get the book. Profits aren't everything. They're the only thing. And I'm going to tell you right now, I've suggested that book to, I don't even know how many people with the podcast, millions of people. And every single person I've ever suggested to read it in the real estate industry has hated it. And it's because basically it does what Julie and I just attempted to do, which is cutting through all the BS that so many of us have normalized in our businesses. So go to Amazon, get the audio version. The middle of the book is kind of a lot of pitching for his services, but just get the gist of what he's trying to get you to understand. So profits aren't everything, they're the only thing. If you really want to get control of your business and personal life, that's the way to do it. Get that book. We're listening to part 2 on our podcast tomorrow. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, and we'll talk with you on the show tomorrow.